here. The whole committee's here, so let's get started, okay?
Okay, this is the May 5th, 2020 Business Operations Committee meeting. And on the first order of business, I do not have the minutes available for review of the April 21st meeting. They were posted to the website, our website, both in audio and video. And I would hope that was going to suffice, but if the committee wants me to go back and transcribe those, we can. But moving along to point 201, elementary staffing review. Mr. Min is going to take us through the elementary staffing review, and you guys will recognize his spreadsheet as you see it. Mr. Min?
Thank you. This is the most scary part for me, making sure that you can see my screen. Can I get a yes there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm good.
All right. This is a chart that has worked for me since I've been in this position. You know, and the board committee when I've come and presented. Very colorful, I know. Some of you joke around about it, but it really does help me in all of my presentations that I do throughout the year. You know, throughout the year, it really just goes to pink and reds. But this time of the year, there are multiple facets of colors here that mean different things. So pink, again, for those that forget, pink is the cap number that I have to worry about when I'm staffing. So in each grade level, there's different cap numbers. That pink number, the pink shade that you see is a cap, you know, a kindergarten for 22, 24 at first, 25 in second, third, 26, and then 28 for fourth and fifth grade. Once you see the red there, that means I'm either at the +2 number and I can't go any further, or I'm in violation of the contract. They're pretty stationary on this sheet. It's what NFT is familiar with when I review my numbers with them as well. And then here for tonight, you're going to see blues and grays, which you saw in the fall as well. Blues are signifying a requested plus section in the grade area, and a gray would be a minus section in the grade area. The one color that's standing out on this sheet is that lime color, never used before and only used based on the request at the last meeting. Mrs. Hollenbach asked about where we are with kindergarten registrations as of today. So as of April 30th, that lime green color are the live registration numbers at each of these schools that these students are already registered and ready to go. So 581 students already registered at this time. I will tell you, based on what I know, you know, we're well ahead of the game. You know, you're talking 300 or 400 kindergarten registrations that happened between June and October last year. So we're in good shape there.
Paul, I have a question about kindergarten.
Yes.
Why is Buck and Hoover pink at 23?
We're going to go back to.
But Florida Bar is still red at 23. Shouldn't that be pink too?
I'll go over that.
Okay.
In a minute. Actually, I don't want to use kindergarten as my starting point.
No, I got you.
Just because it confused some people in the fall, and I just don't want to go there again. But those questions are great questions that I will be sure to answer before we get off this page. Any questions with the color coding?
No.
All right. So in fourth grade, I have an overall up to. Is somebody saying something?
No.
Up to in fourth grade, you can see at Buck, Furtabar, and at Schweitzer, I'm already at the cap of 29. I'm not over the cap of +2. We're starting the year if these numbers hold true. Another thing I want to touch base on here real quick is these numbers right here. These usually aren't for this presentation purpose usually are just the numbers that I roll up from the September, October meeting. I didn't do that for this year. These are live third grade numbers moving up to fourth grade next year. So as of April 30th, last week, there was 115 third graders. They're moving up. So I just wanted to get as live and true as a number I could for this committee tonight. And we're running it with 4 sections here at Buck. Average class size is 29. That's why it's in pink. Now, I want you to focus in on this section here. If we were to minus a section, and I know this is a bad example here because we're already in pink, I couldn't do that because we would be running a class size of 38 and again, over the contract. So let's just look at Walter Miller, for example. I'm saying let's add a section there. You run it, we're running it currently at 23. One might say that's pretty low. All right, but you have, if I took a section away, I'm at pink, starting the school year at 29 in 4 of my schools. Here's why this is key that I really don't want to do this. And I'm sure Ms. Burkholder would be happy about this. We have 3 schools that receive ELD kids, English language learners. Miller is one of them. That's a transient population. Starting at 29 isn't going to help. There's a possibility of taking a student who has very limited English speaking skills and having to transport them either down to Tawanka or Furtabar, one of the other 2 schools. So that's why this is actually a good example. I'm asking, if I took a section away, this would become 29 in pink. And just based on what I just said about the ELD, that being one of our schools where we put our English language learners, not a good scenario to be in. Any questions there?
And if you took a section away there, wouldn't all the other grade averages go up too?
So that, yes, Marty. And with that being said, you know, if I did that, this class average down here that you're looking at, 27.5, shoots up closer to that 29, and I'm only going to have minimal seats available. And when I say minimal seats available throughout the district to stay within that 29 number that I have to stay in district wide, I'm only going to have, looking at it real quick, I'll have to start the school year, I'll have
under 20.
Yep. Seats available.
Why are we having so many more kids? Like at Tawanka, we have 140. Never mind, I'm reading that wrong. Never mind.
It's 166. This is
Current. It's current. Yeah.
This is current right now.
Right, I know, I'm reading it wrong. I'm sorry.
So we're picking up 50 more kids over this year.
This year from last year.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that's 2 teachers because you divide 50 by 2.
Yep.
And we had an increase of 33 third graders during the year last year. That's why our number is so high there. So we had those 33 students move in during the year.
So they didn't start the year, Michelle? They moved in during the year?
Correct. We had a large number of third graders, this current third grade group that moved in. It was a transient group, most of them being ELD.
Okay.
147 from K through 4 moved in this year, just as up until last week.
So with this chart and everything, how the bottom line, that's at the bottom right side. How many teachers are you recommending we add?
Why do you want to get to that number right now?
Because we have an hour limit.
It's at 4. In October, it was at 5. We met as a group on Friday and made some maneuvers and went down to 4. This was going to be part of my presentation at the end that I was going to ask, as I have in years past, to keep 1 or 2 in abeyance, not to use it right away, but if I needed it, to use it. So we have knocked the number down from 5 sections to 4. Don Irwin hasn't reflected that in his numbers, but there's only 4 right now spread out throughout this chart of needs as far as staffing.
And
Where
with
they
those
at with
four, we
grades?
need them all, we wouldn't be putting one in reserve, so to speak. in case-
That's what the abeyance is. I'm asking to keep that in reserve and not if I need it. And I think, we took it out of 3rd grade here, and I'm real iffy about that. Marty, you just asked me what grades. We
Yeah.
have two in kindergarten, an overall 1 in 1st grade, and -1 in 3rd grade. I know I skipped 2nd grade there only because it went down, and it's a wash in 2nd grade. And then 4th grade, you saw a +2.
So all 4 of those teachers would be utilized this year. You don't have one in reserve, is that correct?
Those 4 that are noted down below would all be used. There's none in reserve. I'm asking that 5th that you saw in September be that one that I'm using in abeyance, and have that in reserve. Therefore, it wouldn't show on the budget as a savings. It would actually still remain in the budget as a cost.
Gotcha.
Last year, I think I used the last one that you guys allowed me. I think I used it late August.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I know I'm not on the committee, but do we have a leveling process for the beginning of the school year?
No.
We don't use leveling?
No.
So do you know what leveling is?
Yes.
We do not, Cindy.
We don't. And that becomes problematic, Cindy, when, once July 1st rolls around,
Right.
I start taking all of our attendance exceptions who have been removed and put back to their home school. I then start reviewing them because since I've been here, the practice has that we try to honor attendance exceptions without transportation the best we can for families. And that leveling process will never take place with also asking for attendance exceptions. I get attendance exceptions all throughout the year.
Okay.
Where are we at with attendance exceptions right now? Higher than last year? Same?
We're actually lower.
Okay.
I have put in, since I've been here, I put in some restrictions with attendance exceptions, such as if attendance is poor the previous year or academics are poor, then we look not to honor that. When I say not to honor it, we look into those reasons why those things happen. But if it's just a matter of a situation where it's just not working in that school, we do put that child back to their home school.
Okay.
Questions? That went much faster than what I was expecting. Middle school. All right, and I asked last year for a staff, and I think that was the only year since I've been here that we did increase staff at the middle school. There's no staff increase here. The colors mean the same. These sections aren't true sections as the elementary is. If you think of this as, only because I just ate, I guess, and my favorite food is pizza. If you think of these sections as pizza pies, each slice is a 0.2, or each slice is a core content area at the middle school. So when you say a section, it's not it's a section of combined. That pizza pie has 8 slices. In my pizza pie in middle school, I have 5 slices. It consists of a math course, an English course, a reading course, a social studies course, and a science course. 0.2, 0.2, 0.2 to make up that one section. So these numbers here, and they don't flow as well as they do elsewhere. I can't put kids. Sometimes we don't team, for the exception at Maple Point. The other 2 buildings aren't on team. So kids fly all over the place. And if you look at these numbers, we are tight section-wise. There is no ask anywhere for additional staff. Enrollment, we do believe we'll see some relief moving forward. It's not happening this year, but we are tight but manageable at the middle school. And again, these are live numbers that are in bold. So this is our current 4th grade moving up in this area here into 5th grade. And again, I am up against the cap, and I do have to manage that with the +2 there. It's a straight 35 in the other 3 grades as a seat cap size. But again, the most important thing when you're looking at sections in middle school, one, we're not on the teaming concept except for Maple Point, and it's not a true section per se or a teacher per se. It's really just a piece of a content area when we say section. Crickets. Any questions?
No.
Theoretically, if I'm reading this chart right, clustering in 5th grade, if you reduce the section, you'd be in pink.
I'd be in pink, yes.
Okay.
Again, all of these are true color forms, just to be consistent. The pink and red mean the same across the board.
So theoretically, if push came to shove and we were short, we could reduce the clustering to 7.
Well, again, you'd be reducing.
I'm not suggesting that, but if I'm reading this right, we theoretically could do that.
But Tina, you would be reducing a 0.2 in English, a 0.2 in math, a 0.2 social study. You wouldn't be decreasing a true 1 per se, a true
Well, all right.
FTA.
All right, I'll make sure I'm understanding it right. That's what clustering is the first thing that jumped out at me.
Yeah.
That's right.
So basically, any even number has to be reduced by 2 to make the schedule work, to match things out. If there's an odd number there, it already matches up with an odd number that makes the world work. So if you knock off one odd number, you have to knock off another odd number. Everything has to come out to be even in the middle school. It's
Well, I'm not suggesting we do that. I just wanted to make sure I was reading it right.
right.
And some of these numbers, these people are cross grade level content, cross grade levels too. Meaning a teacher could be teaching a 7th grade math class as math's bad.
Well, an 8th graders and 7th graders for math or something, right? Algebra.
Yep, math was bad example because of the leveling, but in social studies, that teacher could be doing a 7th grade social studies and an 8th grade social studies, just to maximize the staffing.
Right.
Okay. Again, my heart's dropping if I'm sharing or not sharing.
You can
You are?
see it.
Thank you. All right, here's the high school, and I think the biggest topic tonight. The biggest questions I heard coming out of last meeting was where are we putting here, and where are we implementing the 6th period language? First, I want to discuss the overall savings. We are down a 0.2 in social studies. If you look, we have a staff savings as well as in the budget assumptions, there was a full FTA that was requested. We're condensing that. Both of those positions will be condensed through teaching 6 periods. So we'll have 10 teachers teaching 6 in social studies. In science, we're eliminating our grad lab positions. Again, it's showing a full savings of an FTE of 1 there. Special ed, we did some condensing. Despite enrollment and needs there, we're doing some condensing and we're going to be a wash. Health and PE, showing a savings. We have enrollment needs there we need to cover additional sections, which we're doing through the 6th period based on enrollment. There will be 5 teachers within health and PE teaching 6 classes. Business, there's a retirement. Again, 5 teachers will be teaching 6, showing a -1 there. Art, 2 retirements, and I think this was a question from Ms. Hollenbach in the last meeting. We had the 2 retirements. There's some shuffling where we shared at the high school and at Maple Point an individual art teacher. We condensed some of those sections of art. We're bringing that person from Maple Point up to the high school full time to also help replace some of that retirement. So out of the 2 retirements, you have a 1.6 overall savings with some of those teachers teaching an additional 6th class. So you'll see a overall in the budget 1.6 savings in art. Tech ed, we're moving. We have a +2 there. We are having the release of the lead teacher back, taking that back to assume some of the enrollment needs that we saw increased in our tech ed program. But there's only a 0.2 showing as a true need there for a total savings of 6.4. I want to share a
What's
second.
that in dollars?
Do I have dollars on that?
Yep.
I don't have dollars. That'll be Don.
Don,
I'm sorry, what was the question?
the 6.4 savings for the 6th period in the high school, what does that equate to in dollars?
So can I get to my other,
Sure.
so here you have, in the one that I was talking about, you'll have 3 periods of art being taught by a 6th period. So there's what's that, 15,000 there. I'm reluctant to get into the total savings just because I don't want to mess Don's sheet up
We
there
can wait
for
for Don to
you.
give it. I was just looking for a ballpark because I'm curious what that does to the bottom line. Is it minimal?
Right.
Is it a decent impact? That's all.
Right.
It's got to be at least $600,000. You do 100 per teacher.
Right. But if you look at it, and here's exactly what I just verbalized to you. The 5 periods teaching in business. Social studies, you got 5 here and you got 5 here. Total of 10 teachers teaching 6. English, we're going to have 5 teaching 6. And health and PE, 5 teaching 6 based on the enrollment needs. Questions as far as that? Dr. McGee, did I miss anything?
Oh, can you go back to the your last the master sheet at the bottom? You're not going to see a net savings because there is a net savings,
Can you see it?
but it's based on a budget that never existed because we saved by not adding. So I can demonstrate that if Paul can get us back to the other sheet.
Sorry.
That's all right. So the middle school's got classes of 750 in it. The high school's got classes of 3 650s and 1 just under 6. And as they begin to swap each other out, assuming kids don't go anywhere, which they don't, we're going to have a high school of over 2,900 in 3 years, which is where we started in 2009. So as Paul brings that screen
I'm
back,
trying, Rob. I am.
I'm telling jokes. Hey, what did the 0 say to the 8? Anyone know?
Did it come up?
Yes.
Yes.
So if you slide down the very bottom there, Paul, that's just a history of September enrollment, the actual, versus staff at the high school. So I don't know what year it is on the far left, but of 2,700 kids, we had 193 in staff. You can watch that cost savings and enrollment decrease over a period of a decade. Now, over the last 2 years, over the last 3 years, you're starting to see kid increases. Last year we increased and didn't add staff. This year we're increasing again. We can't avoid it. So the truest sense is to show you that it's really there is to slide back up to phys ed. That's the easiest, most efficient scheduled program at Neshaminy High School. It's one big pile of kids. Actually, it's three big piles of kids, so I'm exaggerating. But it started at 10 all the way over on the left. We held it at 9. We can't hold it at 9 anymore because those three big piles are bigger than 34. We have to push that up. That's a true sense of the size. And that same thing is reflected in various departments depending on their past efficiency. So if Paul goes down to the bottom again, we are actually down staff about 4 total bodies. I have a math error there. It's my fault. 178 to 174, but there's a savings of higher than that because we're not adding. So Tina asked for the bottom line and how it affects our bottom line. It never really was in the bottom line except for maybe some of it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what's going on at the high school.
But to get to Tina's question, for every one that's down there, it's a savings of $108,000.
On a budget that didn't exist at the moment. So, but I understand. Thank you.
So Don, you're saying our base calculation for teaching staff now is we're going to use 108, where in the past
Yes.
we previously used 80 or 82?
I'm talking about with the PCERS, health insurance, everything. I'm bringing them in on step 3 because some of them, will have experience other places. So I'm
Okay.
being very conservative. Yes.
All right.
I'm talking total package of 108.
Well, I actually think that's a more practical number than what we used before, but I just wanted to be sure that's the number we're using. Thank you.
Paul, you still there?
Yep. Did I get the screen back?
Yeah. Well, it was blank. Mine was blank for a little bit. I see you now.
Questions, concerns? Anything I can answer?
Anything from the committee members? Anything else from the administration on those points? Okay. Let me take you to the next item then on our agenda, which is an update of where we're at and how, at least I'm thinking about this budget as we move forward, and hopefully I can get you all to see it this way.
Don, any of the adjustments that Paul just went over, are they in the numbers you're going to show us?
They are all in the numbers I'm showing you, except for that one that he's holding in abeyance. I didn't take that cut.
No, okay.
So what
Thank
there were a ton of ads based on what I showed you last time, and then there was a ton of cuts as well, and they've all boiled down to where we're at right now. So this will be the budget update for the May 5th, 2020 meeting. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we ended on April 23rd. We had a deficit of $2.2 million. And some of the highlights that happened after the 23rd, we had an additional retirement. So I'm saving $125,000 there. That reduction in that grad lab and science also provided $125,000 savings. We were getting desperate here at the end, and we talked about whether or not Rob's position could be filled immediately, and we're discussing that it's going to take a little bit of a while till that's done. So we said, okay, what if he was hired halfway through the year? So we took a $72,000 savings there. Through attrition, we eliminated a confidential secretary for $100,000, and at the end there was no increase in health insurance premiums from 1920 to 2021. We're doing very well on our self-funded. Wow. I gave a hint of that previously in previous committee meetings where I showed you that we were doing very well. We did well last year. and we continue to do well this year. And quite honestly, with the COVID crisis, you know, regular doctor's appointments and elective surgeries are down. So I think that will carry through for the remainder of the school year. So as we begin this evening, we have a budget deficit, or what you guys have up to this point called a budget gap, of $1,728,000. And I just want to bring to your attention some of the estimates now that are coming out. You know, I laid down my marker on April 23rd of last month. And since that time, PASBO has come out and they're estimating the loss of the local revenue will be traumatic based on, you know, what has happened in the Great Recession, although it'll be more impactful because it'll be, you know, a steeper drop off and potentially deeper. And so they have now come up with some estimates as well. So it's natural to compare your estimates, my estimates, to what they've come up with. Under scenario one, they're discussing that the economy recovers quickly and local revenue would be down $4.8 million. Under their second scenario, that the economic recovery lags and the local revenue will be down $5.6 million. And so that, you know, that the more it lags, I think in some respects, the more that I think that the federal government will come in with more stimulus money, but that is yet to be seen. You can't bank on that either. But I just wanted to compare those two estimates for you as compared to what I had done previously. And the last time we met, I had shown an economic revenue reduction of $4.6 million. So before the big study came out, I think we were pretty on target with what our numbers were. And in addition to that, if you recall, we had a $700,000 state reduction based on the assumption that the state would supplant their basic ed subsidy with the stimulus money that's supposed to be coming to Neshaminy. And that number has actually risen from 700,000 now to closer to well over 800,000. I think it's 840. So they're actually mirroring that right to the amount that we get in Title I funds. There was some gaming going on there initially, but so there's a potentially additional $100,000 in that amount, which is not reflected in my bottom line numbers here this evening either. So I just want to make, you know, we were, at the time I told you I was kind of guessing, and I was, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't a far-fetched guess. I came down pretty close to what some of the experts are now predicting. So a bottom line for this evening, we have a budget gap of $1.7 million, which remains. We have revenues of nearly $183 million, expenditure of $184.7, but these numbers still include the Act 1 increase of 2.6%. And I recognize that that's going to be part of the very hard decision that the board members will be asked to make at this time because of the economic downturn. You know, prior to March the 6th, you know, that was a, I don't want to say given, but that was expected that we were going to have these increases. And now that decision is back on the table. And I understand that. It's very hard to raise your taxes on your neighbors at the time when your neighbors are potentially struggling. So what I've begun to do in my own mind is I began to compartmentalize these two differences, if you will, these two pots. One we're calling the budget gap of $1.7 million, and one I'm calling the Act 1 increase of $3.3 million. And I'm gonna talk about them separately tonight and ask you to, eventually they'll come back together at some point, but I'd like to keep those together, separate, because they are different. And I think if they remain separate, I think it makes better sense. So the budget deficit, or the budget gap of that $1.7 million, it's temporary. It is resulting in part because of the revenue loss of $4.6 million from COVID-19. And I don't believe it's prudent that we would make permanent programmatic cuts to deal with the temporary short-term reduction in local revenue. I'm saying that. And I believe the administration agrees with me on this. And my recommendation at how we deal with this part of the budget deficit is we put a hold on the combination of the facility improvements for next fiscal year, as well as bus purchases in the amount equal to that $1.7 million. If you recall, we had 1.85 for capital improvements, and we had about $700,000 net after the federal grant that we had for buses. And I'm saying that somehow we put a cap on those two totals so that we take out 1.7 million of that. And that's temporary. It's back in the budget next year as the economy returns and recovers, and we begin to do those things again next year. Now, that's not a terrible thing, but it's the least painful thing potentially. It's kicking that can down the road that I would typically be in here telling you not to do, because as we go on, we're already behind as a district on facilities maintenance and projects. We're faced with Pearl Buck. What do we do? We got the price tag on that the other night. It was $10-11 million. I forget the exact figure, but this is a very different and a shockwave to the economy. And I'm saying that we take this difficult decision and put that aside for a year to see how this plays out. And I'm sure you all have an opinion about that, but I ask you just to hold until you see the other part of this, because you might have an opinion on that as well. And what I'm saying is the Act 1 piece of this, it's permanent. And so to the degree that the board does not want to raise taxes during this economic downturn, then we have to begin to think about making programmatic changes that would be permanent. Because if you were to increase the millage rate, that millage rate comes back to you every year thereafter, and it's permanent increase. And so I think at that point, if we're not going to do the Act 1 revenue, we come back to Tina's request of let's look at what are the possible permanent alterations or curtailments that we could make that would be permanent and be in lieu of the Act 1 tax increase. And so the first thing that comes to mind is security. We could eliminate the school resource officers. We could eliminate the echelon contracted services. We could eliminate the position of director of security, and that amount is there because this individual will be entitled to unemployment moving forward for the year, so that would significantly decrease the total savings in year one. But you'd have a potential savings there of $390,000. And I don't know if you guys want to talk about these individually or wait to see them all.
See them all.
Okay.
Don, can we say too, maybe I missed it, but can we just say that these are the cuts that we came up with that weren't taking programs away from kids, weren't taking teachers away from kids, but that not really any of these are coming out of cabinet telling you that we believe that this is what should happen for this upcoming year, just because of all the uncertainty. But we're giving you a list here of things like, what could you take out that maybe a child wouldn't notice it? The fact of the matter is, this first one out of the gate, security is a newer cost for school districts, but today, would you really give this up? Probably not, right?
No, I'm not a fan of getting rid of the SROs.
No.
Yeah.
But those are, most of what you see here is going to be of a similar nature. Could it be taken out of the system? Probably. Would it hurt us? Would it make us less effective? Yes. And that's probably true for any cut. But most of these, what we try to do is stay away from where kids and teachers are most closely involved. So that's what you're going to see on each of Don's slides.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. Someone's asking a question.
I have a question. You said we have forgetting the Act 1 increase, we had a $1.7 million deficit, primarily resulting from a $4.6 million loss in revenue, correct? Projected.
I did say that.
So that if COVID didn't hit, then we would be 4.6, 1.7, 3.1 to the plus side, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure I heard that correct.
And those, that difference has been shaved out of the budget prior to the April 23rd meeting.
No, understood. But if it had been the March 3rd meeting, we'll say, before everything hit, before the world changed, then we would have been looking at potentially at a surplus then, assuming all the other cuts stayed as is. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Then we get into, we try to stay away from student programs, but we get much closer to them when we actually do get into them as we go through these slides. We get into reduce or eliminate curriculum and instruction, central office. There's currently a vacancy there of secondary ed position. We have supervisors in those positions. We have academic coaches that would that are very impactful for education, but you know, they're easy to go after at this time because they're not in front of students necessarily. We have lead teachers and we have avid teachers, and so we're not recommending any of these, but we have them on the list, and depending on which ones you
Explain to me the avid teachers and the lead teachers. Like, just explain that to me. Like, so we have coaches and the lead teachers and avid teachers, and they are additional, they get additional salary above and beyond what the teacher is? Because I just want to make sure I understand it.
Rob, you want to explain that?
Not necessarily additional salary, maybe a little bit. Starting with your academic coaches. They are teachers on special assignment who spend the day in classrooms with other teachers, making sure that they do better. The best thing, somebody you might know is Jim Gosser, who you see periodically on a video explaining to the kids how to do AVID. So Jim has a regular teacher salary, just works with other teachers, does not hold down a classroom. So he, Beth McGinty, 5th grade math or elementary math, Colleen Stahl, elementary literature, and Dr. Gail Park, literature at the high school, all doing good work behind the scenes, making us teach better. Don't hold down classes. That's why they're I don't even know how to say, easier to cut, not something we want to do, but easier to cut. The lead teachers, we have lead teachers in all content areas. They receive a $3,000 stipend. That's not the cut we're proposing. It is the increased release time we added last year that could be given back. So that would be in social studies, math, science, and technology education, which we've already given some back. So there's probably teaching, we can send them back to the classroom for those times. The AVID staff are sections at the high school that, if eliminated, we'd be eliminating a program, and those people could go back to teaching their content area, saving us staff there. That one, the AVID staff, would actually send kids in a different direction, but probably so few kids, and so few is probably well over 100, that it could be absorbed without adding staff elsewhere. Sending the lead teachers back to classrooms and sending the AVID teachers back to their content area isn't going to reduce staff unless you lay somebody off or ripple it through the system to find the vacancy. So when we start to look at these, we have to look at, are you willing to furlough people? So look at the supervisor line. One of our supervisors is a former certified staff member. I assume he would go back to the staff at some point, thereby driving someone else bottom of the line out of the staff. So some of these cuts on this page deal with staff furloughs if we actually take them. Tina, I hope that answered your question. Probably a little bit.
It does, out of curiosity, and I'm not saying I want to do anything one way or the other. How many AVID teachers are there, or how many of these positions are you talking about?
So basically, there is no such thing as an AVID teacher. There is one teacher that has 3 sections, one teacher that has 2 sections, one teacher that has 1 section, one teacher that has 1 section. I think I'm at 1.2 total teachers over 4 different bodies. So if we were to cut that, we'd send 0.2 back to the English department. And honestly, are we going to shave off 0.2 of a full-time English teacher somewhere? Probably not. So they're all spread out. One's a special ed teacher, one's a business teacher, one's an English teacher, and I cannot come up with who the 4th one is.
Special ed.
Special ed, thank you.
You know, and let me just jump in here too and say this. One of the things that the board was very gracious to talk about was just how nicely the CNI directors and their team were able to do to put together our most recent package here for our home online learning. This is really the team. This is a district that has a really small team. We're not suggesting again that this is an area to cut, but we're just showing you, if you said, hey, you had to get a few $100,000 or X number of dollars out of the budget, but don't touch teachers, don't touch something that kids will notice. Kids wouldn't see this, or at least they wouldn't see it right away, but ultimately we would not be as strong an organization in terms of making advancements and improvements in the system. So anyway, this is kind of just us trying to point you in a direction of where there are positions, but not necessarily what we're recommending ultimately as a choice for this year.
If we take all these positions, it just leaves Michelle. So we might as well just cut her power and take her computer away too, save a little bit more money.
No, we have a cot for her in the conference room.
Okay.
I already use it, Tina.
Then we get back into the secondary programs, reductions potentially. You know, we could potentially reduce or eliminate family consumer science. We could reduce PE at the high school. Someone could come up with another high school elective that some would say, well, we don't have to do that. And all those things are potentially true, but at the same time, as Rob will point out, those kids, if you were to cut out family consumer science, while we can put a price tag to that, the hard part is that where do those kids go in that high school that's tight anyways? Now you have several hundred kids looking for some other elective, and where do those children go? And so while all these potentially have a number to them as it relates to price, they also have an impact related to where do those children go, and you know what other staffs have to be added if we're not going to do X, because those children have to be in front of an instructional teacher for that period, and those classes are typically full already.
Explain to me the return all to lunch line.
This was Broad probably has a better handle on this, but as I understood this, some of our students currently skip lunch and they take a 7th major class. And so what we're saying is that they would, go ahead, Rob.
Okay, about one in 4 students, 9 through 12, and choose, instead of taking lunch, they take an extra major. Basically, instead of taking 6.5 credits, they take 7.5 credits, and they don't have lunch during the day. We actually proposed eliminating this when the high school first opened. It never even got out of our mouth before people were at the board meeting upset about it. So this addresses the child. This particular plan's existed for 20, maybe plus years, that addresses the child that has their core classes, takes an instrumental or vocal class, and wants to take a world language. That fills up their schedule, and they have no room for the next 4 years to take any of the other electives at Neshaminy High School. So they've chosen to take extra instead of lunch. It's kind of one of those advantages. Now, if we did away with it, we could reduce staff in the elective areas by that percentage over time. And the kids, instead of going to their 7th course, if you take the, 700 kids, we'll say 600 because it divides by 4, 150 extra kids in lunch every period, which would make that lunchroom rather interesting. At the same time, you would reduce your elective needs for the students and staffing in those areas. Taking that cut now means rescheduling Neshaminy High School. It's already out the door. The roller coaster is halfway up the lift for next year. It also means layoffs to save any money, because that staff isn't going to be needed. It's got to push somewhere. We can remove the program, but to save money, we have to lay people off somewhere along the way with that. That requires Lisa Pennington and Ryan Staub to go through and pluck those 700 kids out of their big schedule, retally, go back to Mr. Meehan to restaff, go back to that sheet we showed you with the minus 6.4 on it. It'll probably be a bigger number, but that all starts now on May, whenever. So that's what's involved in that. Those type of options can happen. They have to happen well in advance so we can plan for them. And maybe can be done in such a, if that's the choice, maybe can be done in such a way through attrition. But again, it's there because the community asked for it. We've forgotten why the community asked for it. And when we start to take it away, that same community member is going to come back and say, my kid sings and my kid's taking Spanish. He or she can't take all this stuff and we want to. Why can't we do it?
Rob, explain to me what a parochial school model would look like for PE.
I don't know. I've never been in a parochial school, Mr. Parentano, but
you know what it is.
So we've always said we do too much with PE. Some years ago, I think my first year at the high school, we eliminated PE from the 10th grade. And the reason we were able to do that is because PE was offered in 9, 10, 11, 12, and health was offered in 10th grade. The combination of PE and health in the 10th grade was time-space continuum impossible because it gave us 48 blocks in a 49 blocks in a 48 block grid. So it was actually a good thing to do as far as scheduling. If we were to take PE out of one grade, we could save the staff that teaches that grade. Same thing as Don explained with family consumer science. That leaves 700 kids with a hole in their schedule. So at this time, that's very hard to deal with. We have to have some type of structural change to address that. Options include getting rid of the kids, which isn't an option. All right. Getting rid of the hole in their schedule, which means offering them something else. And if something else is a study hall, we've actually reduced education and have to staff that study hall, or offering them another class, which is, we don't run any half credit classes like PE. We'd have to expand it to a full credit class, and we'd actually be adding teachers elsewhere. The fourth option is to change how the high school's scheduled so that block of time disappears for everybody in that particular grade. So it's the same example with, pick any department. I don't know why we're picking on family consumer science. They have a following of about 600 kids a year. There's 5 teachers there. If I get rid of those 5 teachers and shut down that program, those kids, 600 kids need a spot in their schedule to go. To do that, we'd have to send them to, either give them a study hall or send them to another content area or send them home. And in doing that, I'm going to ask you to renovate those 6 family consumer science rooms so we can use them to house those kids we just got rid of in family consumer science. So this stuff can be done. It has got to be done, say go now, and maybe we can do it years ago or years from now, a year or so from now. And we probably should start with ed development as far as what's best for the program.
Realistically, though, Rob, we don't have enough time to do any of this in September. Is that correct?
I'll use the example I've been saying all along. We don't know what September looks like. We're in a dark room and we're going to swing a budget axe.
Right.
I'd rather if this deficit materializes and we have legitimate problems on our hand, strategically go through it early next year and make those hard choices.
We need to look at it from every angle for next year. Unfortunately, there's not really enough time, in my opinion, to put any of this into place for next year.
And I think that's a practical response, but I also agree that we have to start getting concepts on the table. If we're forced to look at things, we'll be ahead of the game.
Oh, right. We absolutely have to start looking at things now for future, because I don't want to do anything haphazard. It just disrupts too much stuff, in my opinion.
No, the only way you would do that is if, you were in a situation where you actually didn't have the cash. Okay. I mean, that's not the situation we're in. But we have to, if we're talking about the future, we got to start talking about it now, not next year and then be in the same boat. Well, we weren't planning for this. We got to wait another year. I'm not saying we do any of it. I'm just saying you got to be prepared to deal with it.
Well, there's something out left field, but all right, I think we got the picture.
Yeah, I think it's something we address in September because we don't know what's going to happen over the next couple months.
And these 2 slides could actually end up costing us money if you start cutting some of these classes, because it's going to have a ripple effect, like Rob said, and put these kids out.
Right, we can't do that
without a curriculum.
Well, you would have to reprogram the grades in the high school. You'd have to adapt to it.
Yeah, I know, but they already had to submit their classes.
I'm not saying we do it this year. I'm talking about overall.
They're all talking.
Let's talk about that.
I don't want to talk about half-day kindergarten right now.
Well, it's part of the things we have to prepare for.
I agree, but we've talked about that numerous times. We cannot do it in September.
Again, we have to prepare for it.
I agree.
The estimate's 1.3 million. If you go back to half-day kindergarten,
I know, it's 17 teachers.
you have 15 or 16 teachers, so it's probably more than that, but that's an accurate enough estimate.
Right, I agree.
Right.
We could also potentially eliminate the string or band programs at the elementary level. And while this is 4 FTEs, I've minimized the savings because you know, we'd have to pay these people, we'd have to furlough people and pay them unemployment compensation and that kind of stuff. So the savings coming out of the gate is is somewhat muted or reduced there. And also some of that savings on the 1.3 million is because we had seven teachers that would be potentially elementary teachers that we're hiring at that $108,000 this year, where they wouldn't be getting unemployment compensation potentially. So that figure could move up and down depending on how many vacancies are currently out there.
Well, I think that would actually move higher, Don, because then you would already have people in the system that you would be switching to jobs that are needed. So you wouldn't have to fill those 4 elementary jobs.
Yes, that's my point.
Plus, you know, so, you know, you'd be closer to $2 million by the time you were done.
I don't know. We can talk about that. I don't think it gets
I
that
understand
high.
what you're saying. I'm just
Yeah.
looking at the whole picture.
And then we would talk about potentially elimination of the supervisor and special service pupil services under Mr. Devlin, who's here with us tonight. A middle school counselor, high school counselor. None of those are real good ideas because of the mental and social well-being of the students that, you know, that we put such a emphasis on today. So we're not recommending those either, but we wanted to make you aware that they're out there if you wanted to go down those roads.
All right, what's next?
Well, we have the elimination of some support staff. In the budget currently, we have a new middle management IT position, total package of $105,000. That's still out there. And then if you wanted to get further from that, administratively, we were talking about that you could have a reduction in force as a percentage of the overall secretarial staff requiring furloughs. You know, custodial staff doesn't make any sense under the COVID-19 program as it is now. We have to make sure the buildings are clean. So it kind of focuses down onto the secretarial staff. We can't do anything with busing. If we're as you know, the busing is what it is. We're short there. So our hands are kind of tied, but this is one of the areas that we could potentially, if we had to, make a reduction in force and review that with you. And so then we come to co-curricular. We could eliminate freshman sports. We could eliminate middle school sports. We could eliminate the middle school late bus runs to 2 days per week. And, you know, if you wanted to go down those roads, we could find $660,000 savings. And I'm sure that wouldn't go over well with the extracurricular people as well.
Nothing's going to go over very well, no matter what we do.
That's correct, Tina. So when I thought about the Act 1 revenue, I thought about, you know, what does that mean? We have a 2.6% increase on the average homeowner, and that would be an additional $117 per year. The average assessed valuation is almost $28,000. The existing tax on that value is $4,500. 2.6% increase is $117. If you take it, it's $10 per month. And the other thing I kept coming back to myself is that with the COVID-19 recession, when it started in the beginning of March, at that point, the average homeowner with a mortgage had already made 9 payments of their escrow tax payments with their escrow account, with their mortgage. So they have that amount potentially in their escrow for payment on July 1.
We got to worry about next year, Don. We got to worry about next year.
I agree with that. Marty. And I want to take you down some of that road. So if you think about, if you say, okay, I don't want a tax increase this year. And if you begin to compare the 1.6%, which I'm pulling that out of my hat, but I know it's 2.6 this year and we're expecting a reduction next year. What does that look like? So you'd have revenues comparing, 180 compared to 184.6, the expenditures of 183 compared to 189. If you
And
don't
that's
have a
just for the contracts. That's basically based on the contracts.
That's contracts. That's increase. I have a 7.5% increase on health insurance. PCERS is expected to go up a little bit more than projected because of the their earnings problem that they're having right now. So I have boiled into that known contracts for all the teachers, prospective contracts for all the administrators, known increases for NESPA, as well as inflationary increases across the board. And so what I'm saying is that now this is where those two compartmentalized come back together. If you have a 0% Act 1 increase this year, you're looking at a $3.4 million deficit this year, and that balloons to 4.7 next year. That includes an Act 1 increase next year of 1.6%. And
does it factor in recouping any of the 4.6 we're losing per PASMO?
Yes.
Okay.
Marty, thank you for reminding me that, because now that also recoups all those revenue streams as well.
And Don, too, I think the other thing to point out is that you're using that 1.6 because you're expecting that that's going to probably be the new reality for an Act 1 increase.
Yes, because we're expecting the Act 1 increase to be reduced because of the deflationary pressure on wages because of the current unemployment status that the COVID-19 has created.
So in fiscal year 22, you're assuming in those numbers that we recoup all 4.6 million of lost revenue.
In the local revenue, that's correct.
Alrighty. I don't see that happening, but I just good to know the numbers in there.
Well, does that include the 1.6% increase too, Don?
Yes, it does.
All right, so it's a combination, Steve, of the 4.6 and a 1.6 increase.
Yeah, but if you don't recoup, let's say you recoup 3 million instead of the 4.6 million, that would go right to the deficit, right?
And then you got a 1.6 increase in there too, though. So the 3 million plus the 1.6 increase.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly.
You're right, Steve. That if you don't get it all back, if you're short, if you come up short,
Yes.
now you're going to apply.
Yeah.
Right. So that deficit could be 4.7. It could be better than 4.7. We could do better, and we could be 3 million, but it could also be 6 million if we're short on, if we collect 3 million instead of 4.6 million and recouped revenue. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood your calculation. That's all.
And what I wanted to take you through is that if you said, okay, we're not at 2.6, but we're not at 0. We're going to try to split this baby somewhere in the middle. I wanted to show you what a 1% does in 21 and the 1.6 in 22 and how those deficits are then affected. You have 2.1 million this year and 3.4 as you begin next year. And if I could just take you back for 1/2 second. Well, no, I'm sorry. That's the next slide. So that's 1%, 2.1, 3.4. At 2%, you're at $900,000 this year and 2.1 next year. And then at the full 2.6, while you're, and I could find this 138,000 somewhere probably, but you'd have a balanced budget in all respects for this year. And next year you'd have a $1.3 million deficit. And that $1.3 million deficit is assuming that there's no retirements, no resignations, everybody's back. And we know that typically is not the case. So we would think that with the Act 1 increase this year and Act 1 increase next year to the max, that we would have 2 balanced budgets. Now, someone that mentioned to me about state gaming revenue today. State gaming revenue for the 2021 school year is exactly what it was last year. Someone could say, how did that happen? You had the casinos shut down in March. Well, you had this, they were permitted to bet on NFL games this fall. So they have the gaming revenue is flush for the school year. Again, Marty, I don't know about next year, but for this year, they're going to give out the same amount of money as they did last year. And someone also asked me to review the millage rate history, and you can see from 13-14 through 19-20, you have approximately 7% increase over those 7 years. And that's what I have for you tonight. I took out the slide that was kind of trying to put you on the point where, we have to come to some resolution or some consensus tonight, because we have to pass a tentative budget at the May 12th meeting. It doesn't have to be the final budget.
That's the preliminary final on May 12th?
Yes.
Yeah, but that could have any dollar figure on it, as long as we don't exceed it, because we could still change it at the end of June.
Yes, that's correct. You could change it. And why we have to move it up to May 12th is so that we have the ability to have the 30 days in between the preliminary final and the final budget in the regular June meeting.
Well, my opinion is let full board vote on it and get a consensus of where everybody stands, and we'll deal with the chips after the fact. I mean, I'm telling you right now, me personally, I'm not voting for a tax increase. But I'm only one person, so I don't think that we as a committee can make a decision. I think to go to the full board and let the board see how the votes shake out for the proposed final, whatever the heck it's called.
Okay, is that the consensus of the committee?
Me personally, I'm torn because I think as much as I don't want to do it, and I think we should go to fund balance, I'm also concerned because we have one bite at the apple right now. And I mean, listen to what Rob was saying about the high school. The high school staffing and the costs are going to go up. We don't want to cut programs. We got a possibility if we were to do an increase. And again, I'm not sold on it yet myself either. I'm not sold on it morally. Financially, it probably makes sense.
Right.
And I think we could, seeing the numbers, assuming everything's as is in the projections, we pretty much could have a balanced budget for this year and next. That's very appealing because it puts us in a good position to go forward.
I agree with all of that. Like I said, that's why I don't think that we as the committee should make the decision which way to go. I think it's really important for all 9 of the board members to have a voice and a say in how they want to vote. I mean, I'm on record with how I'm going to vote, but and I get the other side of the equation. I mean, yeah, I'm probably cutting off my foot, so to speak, but that's why I think it's too important to not have all 9 people have a specific vote and not just like rubber stamp it like we have so many years in the past.
Is there any legislature on the floor to help the school districts during this crisis? Because I know I'm seeing a lot of stuff for emergency responders and hospitals and police, and I'm applying for all these grants like crazy for the firehouse. But is there currently anything on the floor to help us out during this crisis?
There is a $800,000 line item that's coming from the CARES federal stimulus project, but and that's not included in the numbers I've given you tonight because there's fear that the state is going to supplant the basic ed subsidy that they would give to the schools with this stimulus money because the state's $4 billion short looking at their budget right now.
Yeah, because next year the state will probably be increasing the income tax, increasing the sales tax. Philadelphia's already talked about increasing parking tax and the non-resident wage tax.
Yeah,
So they're going to be the tax increases are going to be all around us. They have to.
And there's also a history too of states doing exactly what Don's saying, taking that federal dollars and saying, well, you're getting 800,000, so we're going to cut your state aid by 800,000. You'll still have the same numbers to work with.
Right.
But it means if you don't have that extra money to work with. Irene, Miss Boyle, I think you were trying to get in there to say something.
Yeah, I think from John too.
I just wanted to say that nobody wants a tax increase. But I think financially a tax increase would make sense. But I think that this is a special year, and I think the people, well, I'm not too sure that they would appreciate, a tax increase this year.
My opinion's along those lines.
John?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm getting a reading here on my internet tag. I have to echo Marty's point of view in that, yeah, financially, it looks right going forward, going up to our Act One. But morally,
Yeah.
I just can't justify it. I just can't, at least not the whole, all the way up to 2.6. I just can't agree to that. I know you break it down into dollars and cents like that. Oh, it's only 114. Well, it's only 114 more that people don't have right now.
Yeah, I mean, everything got turned on its head, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky enough to still be working, but I can walk down the street in the morning and I know all the cars that are still sitting in the driveways, and we don't know what that's going to look like yet come September either. So yeah, I'm torn. I get the numbers. They, you know, in a perfect world, we'd have been sitting pretty, and I don't know. Especially, you know, hate to keep saying this, but we do have our fund balance that we keep for these kind of emergencies.
Exactly.
We're kind of in an emergency.
Yeah. Don, I think for the future, when you break it down to monthly cost of whatever it was, I think it would be good if you broke it down to daily and annually too, so we get it down to like 3 cents.
Yeah, right.
I struck a nerve there. I see that.
Yeah, I do that with my budget all the time because it looks better. It doesn't help at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's. I mean, my thought. It's a tough call. But then again, if I look at history, I voted to close my kid's school. So I don't know. I'm still torn.
I understand it's a hard decision. I get that. I do. And I don't make those recommendations lightly.
So important to have, that's why I think it's so important to have every board member have a voice on this. I don't think it's.
Tina,
Oh, I
Yeah.
just wanted to talk about a little bit about the whole committee system, right? You know, that's the whole idea. The committees get more detail, and I understand that nobody wants to make a decision.
Well, we can take a vote right now. I mean, my vote's to take the money from the fund balance and not raise taxes. That's my vote. If that's the way it passes through committee, so be it.
Yeah.
I don't know that anybody has a decision right now, though, other than me.
Irene, I think you make a good point, though, and I was going to ask Don this question, which is this, which I fear coming out with no good leaning from the 4 committee members as to where you want it to go. If you put that in front of the 9 board members, and let's just say Don puts in front of them the 2.6% Act 1 increase, what happens, Don, if we don't pass a proposed budget at that meeting? There is a deadline that you have to get that passed by. You know, so then now we're scrambling at that point. So I guess my point only is it feels to me like maybe a budget that the committee can at least feel comfortable endorsing as the proposed final budget, hoping that you'll pick up that 5th vote. Who knows, maybe the board president would support the committee, and at least know that you'd get over the hurdle having a proposed final budget ready to go for whatever fine tuning you need to do to get it to a final budget in June.
I mean, if we do it that way, that's fine. I'm a no for raising taxes and taking.
Joe, I was going to actually ask for the opposite. You know, I've been board member for a long time. So is Irene. We've gone, you know, many a budget years down to the last meeting to make decisions. I wouldn't want us to narrow our options heading into June. I was going to ask Tina if she could ask her committee members, they would support moving a final proposed at the administration's recommendation, and to give the board more time to decipher, you know, if, you know, we want to change that at the final budget, or if the board comes to a consensus where it wants to invoke its changes in the budget as to what will willing to fund. I'm not saying that would occur. I just want to keep everybody's options open to the last possible moment. You know, that's my position.
I don't have a problem with that necessarily. I mean, if we vote for it to stand as it is with the increase in there in May, maybe something miraculously will change before June 30th. I don't think so, but you know what I mean? It sounds like to me, if we say yes or no right now on this committee meeting and we do the proposed final budget May 12th, nothing's going to change between now and June. So why even have the discussions? Like, I don't agree.
Well,
with
I
that.
mean, currently, you know, I'm still supportive of the original proposal.
I know. That's
Um,
why I know. That's why I think it needs to go to the whole board.
Right. And I have a few technical questions, if I could be allowed to ask Don. Don, you mentioned in your proposal that if we were to stay on the proposed budget that we have, okay, which is the 2.6 increase and taking the 1.7 out of reserves.
Yes.
Are you still canceling the infrastructure projects for year 21, 22, and 23?
No, not for 22, 23, but for 21, I just want you to acknowledge that if you're going to do it, you're going to take that money out of the reserve.
Well, that's in the 1.7 end that we would take out of reserves.
Yes. So you'd
Right.
be using 1.7 out of the fund
Right.
balance to do it this year. Otherwise, I'm saying if you don't want to, if my recommendation is I'm trying to protect that fund balance to then just put this on
I
hold for a
understand
year.
that, but theoretically, I don't want to use fund balance for operational costs.
Correct.
Fund balance to me is for those one-time fees. I mean, look, we're forced to use it. We use it. That's, you know, again, as everybody said, that's what it's there for. But I don't
you know
like
what, Steve?
What?
I was this close. I can't see my own finger. I was this close to, you know, giving you guys a budget that was balanced, that had out of, you know, current revenues that 1.8 and the $700,000 for the buses. So I'm just, in my mind, I'm having a hard time getting over it because I know you guys have used it in the past, but I was ready to give you guys a budget that was balanced, that still provided those values out of the current revenue streams.
And where did the 10 proposed buses land at? Are they in our 2.6% increase, or are you still taking them out?
Well, if the 10 buses would make the 1.7, it would part of that is in there. About 800,000 is in there for the buses. So of the 800 if it's 1.85 and let's say it's $600,000 for the buses, that's 2.45. And I'm saying that you'd only need 1.7 from the fund balance. So of that amount, 1.75 is in there.
So the buses are in there.
The buses
I'm sorry,
are here, so I'm looking back through your slides here.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry, that's 750,000. 750,000, not 1.75 is in there.
Look, the way I feel about it, and I have a lot more questions, but they can wait, is, you know, we made these commitments, and if we start dialing them back now, we're going to end up where we were 10 years ago. And, you know, of course, nobody, you know, wants to end up there. But, you know, moving forward, there has to be serious considerations. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again, you know, we're responsible for 1 through 12. Kindergarten is a necessity, but it's also, when you look at the budget, it's more important to have the kindergarten program than anything else. And I'm not saying we change it back to half day. And I know me and the administration have clashed over capping it, but you got to do something. And I really believe that we imposed a cap. If the PDE wants to fight us on the cap, we'll fight it out with the PDE. We have, opinions that vary on it, legal opinions that vary on it. I say you save those 2 positions this year. You cap full day kindergarten at 640. And worst comes to worst, if we lose a battle with the PDE over it, we'll worry about it next year. But you have to start on a road to try and control costs and redirect revenue in operational areas to where we're mandated to put them. Because nobody wants to cut band. I would never cut band or music. I mean, we got great programs.
Steve,
What?
I mean, you know, we're talking about cutting kindergarten. You know, I want to talk about.
But we used to have half-day kindergarten. We had half-day kindergarten for 50 years. Full-day kindergarten is a great program, okay? But I'm going to go back to what Marty said the other day. You want a $20 sandwich and you only got $10, you only get a $10 sandwich. So
Steve,
if we're going to raise taxes and we're going to move forward, okay, or are we going to rely solely on the reserves and try and pick up a $7 million deficit in 2 years? So
cutting educational programs is not the same as cutting the band. I'm sorry.
well, I mean, are you going to cut the thing? We're not getting rid of it. We're dialing it back. The idea was never to put every private kindergarten out of business. The program's growing, and it's good that it's growing, but it's growing beyond our projections, and it's growing beyond our ability to maintain it. Because every year over the last 3 years, you know, we're increasing. So if out of everything that's on the plate, okay, that program isn't state mandated, okay? The other programs are, and what we support them with is what has been the norm for 40 or 50 years. So
in deference to prior boards, I mean, we debated full-day kindergarten for about 5 years.
Right.
And it was always about the cost, and in the end, we made the decision that $1 million was worth everything, every dime.
right.
I
Well,
want to talk about that.
well, you're way above $1 million, you know, at this point.
Well, let's not get lost in the forest for the trees. If the kindergarten enrollment and population is going up, then that means our demographic is going up, and we're going to have issues in grades 1 through 12 when all these kids need to go somewhere too. So
Well-
let's look long-term here too.
I'm looking long-term, and when you look at it, the 5 years that we have increased kindergarten have not kept up with where we are now with middle school, because those kids that are in the middle school now, that first class that's in middle school now is the first class that was in the, I think the first year we had the lottery program with kindergarten, when we did the pilot on kindergarten to see if it was feasible.
Grade now. The lottery program, those children are in 6th grade now.
Those children in 6th grade now. So the first 5th graders, the first full year are in 5th grade now.
Correct.
So, you know,
Well, I would be against trying to cap it for this year. I'd be absolutely against it.
I
then you're going to add those 2 positions.
I know.
All right. You
I'm
know,
okay with that.
okay. So at what point are we going to seriously, you know, consider, you know, taking proactive steps? In what areas do we want to dial back the infrastructure program? Do we want to dial back the idea of possibly having a future Maple Point Elementary? I mean, what are we going to do moving forward?
Well, I don't know what that answer is in May of 2020 because the bottom just dropped out of the world. I heard Don say that we would have had a balanced budget and things not happen like COVID-19.
Sure.
So I think we all have to take a breath, take a look, do some long-range planning, and then we can answer those questions. We're not going to answer them now.
That's what I'm talking about. I just said we're going to plan long range. So if we're going to do these infrastructure projects and bring the programs along, you know, there's not much savings. Do we want to cut that Avid program? I mean, it could go, but you know, it's been pretty successful. And we've had a lot of good positive feedback on it. You know, do we want to cut that? I mean, we got to start putting lines in the sand and decide how we're going to move forward.
want to
We
have a
absolutely
good mindset
do, but I
sand
think
when the
that's for
world
the
is
following budget.
Dr. McGee, were you going to say something?
I was going to try. I think as a board, you have to make a philosophical, strategic decision as to whether this district runs cheaper, runs the same, or runs more expensive in the future. It's that simple. We have a strategic plan that's due. We're going to kick it back a few months again. But if the Neshaminy School Board decides what Steve says, we have to draw a line in the sand, then we have to run the school district cheaper. And that's what the community will get because that's what the school board decided yet. But I don't know that I haven't found that decision anywhere that Neshaminy School District costs less to run each year.
Where does it say it costs less? This sitting board has supported the last 3 tax increases. We've invested in these schools. What we're talking about is slowing down the growth.
Well, again, when we plan to improve, Steve, and we plan to make the system better, that's got to be incorporated into the long-term plan. So I think that's what the strategic plan is for. Fortunately, we haven't written it yet, but instead of adding the things, I think full day kindergarten was in, if not the last strategic plan, there's definitely 2 strategic plans ago. So that's how the district decides. And then I think if the board wants that's a strategic plan.
That's not really how we decided full day kindergarten. Full day kindergarten came out of the savings that we generated out of the teacher settlement. If it wasn't for the teacher settlement, we never would have put full day kindergarten in. So, I mean, there's no way that we came about it.
What I'm suggesting is that we actually run the district with a strategic plan through the committees in place and make decisions based on that. That's what I'm suggesting. And if that process leads to how are we cutting costs in the Neshaminy School District, then so be it. We'll make that happen.
And that's definitely a feasible approach, but it all has to be within budgetary constraints. You can't say you're going to add. You can't say you're going to.
Guys. I don't think there's realistically anything that we can do for this budget that we're talking about. I think we figure out if we're going to approve it as is with a tax increase, without a tax increase. If I'm not mistaken, we don't have a consensus right now to determine that. To Steve's point, we need to get pen and paper and figure out the strategic plan of how we're going to go forward for the following year's budget. Ahead of time, not like this, like, oh my God, everything fell out of the bottom. We weren't expecting that, but we need to go into the following year's budget knowing that. We need to decide right now on next year's budget.
We need to figure out, to your point, team, what we're presenting at the May 5th meeting. Are we okay to present what the administration has given to us at this point with the tax increase in, and then we could always back it off, or do we want it out and then add it in?
We can't take it out and add it back in.
Right.
I know where I stand, you know where my vote is,
How about it sounds like, Tina, then from that conversation and from the committee, at least stalemate right here, why don't we put forth the budget as Marty just suggested, right? It's being presented to you tonight. That's what you're saying too, Tina, I think. And then
leave the tax increase in, let the full board vote on it. We'll see where everybody stands, and we'll make a decision after that for the final budget.
And between now and Tuesday, Donna and I are going to spend a little bit of time just making sure that we have the mechanics in place for you to be successful Tuesday night in terms of just making sure that we get the right proposed final budget approval in a timely enough fashion so that the budget also gets approved in June as it has to be. But we'll do that on our end. But we know, I think that's the marching orders from you in terms of right now as a committee, what we should put in front of the Don, does that work for you?
Yes, sir, it does.
I mean, unless, there's 3 other people on the committee, Irene, Marty, and John, they could, you know what I mean? What do you want? We can take a vote. I don't think we have a consensus. I could be wrong.
Do you want to know where my vote is?
Not yet. Hold
No,
on.
you're not on the committee.
LA committee?
Yeah.
I would like to see Don work on the numbers more, understanding where we're coming from a little more firmly. We would really prefer not to impose a tax increase. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly not up to our Act 1 limit. That would be my cutting point. I would not do that.
I would not like to see, I don't want a tax increase this year, but I think if we're going to take it before the full board, there would have to be a full-length discussion at the board meeting at the time before you had the other members, do that.
Well, that's supportive of how we would do it anyway, Irene, so.
All right. So keep it as it is.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
You don't think that's supportive of how we would normally do it?
No, I think if you're going to ask, several members who have not sat on the committee all this time and heard all the details, and you're going to go in that night and say, well, here's what we would like. What do you think? I mean, a lot of people are not going to quite understand what is at stake.
The bottom, it's really simple. Are we raising taxes this year under the current situation that we're in, or we're not? The budget as it stands, if I understand it correctly, does have the tax increase in there, yes?
Yes.
So that's the way it was presented to us, present like that to the board. That'll be the whole basic conversation of the executive session. And let everybody vote, and then we'll know. I mean, it could pass with the tax increase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not, we'll check with John Torrente. I'm not sure that you're talking about this in executive session. You're probably.
No,
Right.
you can't.
Can't talk about the budget in an executive session?
No.
No.
Oh,
Mhm.
I don't know what,
But you can.
I don't know what talking about it anymore right now is going to do, though. I think nobody's, if I'm understanding it, Marty and John are basically undecided. Financially, you'd like to, which I agree. Morally, you don't know that you can. So you're kind of on the fence. Is that right?
I won't vote for the budget as it stands now with the full 2.6% increase.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to see some type of increase. I'll go with John on that one. I would like to see maybe the 1.6 scenario. I think we need to do something because we have things coming down the pike, but not the full 2.6%.
Irene?
Definitely not 2.6, no. And even 1.6 is much, yeah. I'm not in favor of that.
So we need to make some recommendation.
Well, I think we have it. We want them to fix it.
It feels like you're the ones who've heard the most about the budget. It sounds like as a group, the best you're getting to is some portion of that Act 1 increase. I'm only going to say, as the guy who's not going to be here to live through your budget, nor be here to develop the next year's budget, the picture that Don's painting is the picture of a concern, not for next year. Next year is going to be a year that you will survive one way or the other. You'll have a budget.
Right.
It's really the future going forward. And I know that Marty, you spoke to that, and everybody here understands that. It's really getting out of that hole at the start of next year's budget cycle. And you may not only have to investigate more early in the process, but actually implement some of those programmatic changes in order to make a successful 21-22 budget. But again, everybody, administratively, we wholeheartedly understand the difficulty right now when it comes to the raising of the taxes. And so this conversation doesn't take anybody by surprise, but we felt it was necessary to tell you, and that's why Don's trying to show that look ahead at those different numbers, what this ultimately means for the future. And the biggest thing is that Act 1 increase is going to be so limiting, we believe, going forward. And you've got agreements already in place that are going to cost increases that are guaranteed for the next few years that are going to have to be part of the equation. So this is a tough thing. Why don't we look to put together for the full board something that this committee can vote yes for? You need to get some yes votes for your proposed final budget. I don't think Don presented a 1.6 scenario. he had a 0, a 1, and a 2, but 1.6 isn't too bad. I do 1.6 before we do the 0 or the 1. So
All right, do 1.2. Like a baby, do 1.3.
you're splitting the baby in half.
Yeah.
I wanted you gave me 1.6 just a second ago. I was going with 1.6.
Oh, you reminded me I had a bad number there. So,
You know, I mean, maybe I'm the lone voice here
that's
on this
odd.
issue, but I actually feel, you know, that's a big mistake. I feel voting for such a budget while we can rely on reserves is going to set us up for a mistake a couple years out from now. And I don't see how only raising taxes on somebody, the medium household, $6 for the year, you know, or whatever the number would be, is as bad or not as bad as raising them $10 a month. I just don't see the logic. If you're going to raise taxes, you know, you're talking about for the medium household, and we have to understand 50% or higher. So Marty's going to pay a lot more tax. We know that. 50% or lower, you know, but we're talking, and I understand that for Marty, I get, and John and Tina and Irene, I get that moral thing. But how is raising taxes $6 a month in comparison to $10 a month? How's that going to make an impactful difference when we know the amount of damage it can do cumulatively 2 or 3 years down the road if the state sticks to a very low Act 1 increase? I just don't get that. I just don't get that.
I don't get the logic in that, Steve, because that's like saying it would be okay to raise $30 a month.
Well, we're not talking about that amount of difference. If you were talking about that percentage difference,
Doesn't matter
that'd
what
be
the
a different
difference
thing.
is. It's a moral point of view that you're just trying to come up with a compromise. I believe the people in our community will recognize that we need to fund the school district. We need to pay for the education of their children. But if they know that we have a reserve that we're keeping in a lockbox somewhere, they're going to throw holy hell at us. But if we come up with a compromise and say, all right, we didn't go all the way up to 1.6, but we did our best to whittle it down and came up with 1.4, 1 point somewhere in there, I think they'll accept that.
And because we're doing
it's a possibility, I don't see it. You know, we're planning on spending. We're planning on spending, you know, 10 to 12 million at a reserve over the next couple of years on the infrastructure project.
Steve, you don't know that. We don't know how the economy is going to respond.
And Don, didn't we bring money back in?
And you can make the same argument the other way. But I understand your point of view. I'm not saying
we're not getting off this, and we need to get off this.
Get off the what?
Don, one real quick thing. Didn't you say for the year ended June 20, we're bringing monies back into the reserves?
Yes.
Yes, we did.
Okay. All right. So let's keep that in mind too. So our reserves are going to go up.
What was that number, Don?
I had estimated it about, I think $2 million.
Was that high? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You know, we didn't pound the buses this year. We didn't buy a lot of the gasoline. We did have some savings there.
All right.
So, John, in your thought process, if you want to take the money out of the reserves, you still want to take the full amount then, right? So we're going to fund everything in the way you're thinking?
What are you talking about? Full amount.
Well,
If not making cuts, for example, the 2 teachers for kindergarten, he doesn't think we should fund them.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in the scenario where you're going to you're just saying take the bigger difference out of reserves, but fund the budget for the same amount.
I'm just not following you, Steve. I'm sorry.
Well, Steve, I guess it's going to be asked.
Guys, I really think we need to stop because nobody's following anybody anymore. Everybody's getting a little punchy. I don't know what any further discussions.
Trying to figure out if we're only going for, let's say, what was the figure? Let's say 1.5%, just for argument's sake. We're still funding the whole $184 million budget. We're just going to use more money out of reserves.
You have to, right?
Well, that's the scenario we're talking about.
There were some-
Okay.
Without any cuts, Steve, is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Without any cuts, do you want us to still try to reduce the numbers? Is that what you're?
No. I'm just saying, with the recommendation of the committee, and we're going to use a hypothetical number so we don't argue over it, 1.5%, we're still going to fund the $184 million budget by taking the balance from reserves.
Oh, that's what you meant. Yes, that's what I meant.
Yes, that's what you're talking about. Okay.
We're going to balance the budget from reserves.
We're going to balance. I should have said it that way. Thank you, Marty.
Okay.
Right.
So just to put it in a ballpark, 1.5% is 2.5 mils.
All right. I think to John's point, Don, and I agree, is that I think we need to do something, and we want the taxpayers to realize we didn't go to the full tilt. We have to do something because we do have to plan for the future, because you know what? We don't know what, like Rob said, we don't know what September's bringing. We don't know what next week's bringing. So,
Right.
we're not trying to make your job harder, but we are.
No. Don't worry about that. Hey, once this board decides what the tax increase is or is not, it's an infallible decision. I'm not going to second guess it.
Right.
I just want to make sure that we have it. You have all the information you need.
And I think we're in a better spot leaving this committee with that idea. Steve,
Agreed.
I heard what you had to say. You can still make your comments and maybe sway people to make us change the proposed upwards, right, Steve, based off of your comments. But at least leaving here tonight, I would think at least there's three out of four of you are going to be voting yes for the proposed budget, at least tentatively right now in the form that we're going to send it out with that 1.5% as opposed to the full Act 1.
Is that settled on? I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
We really want to get something that the committee is going to be able to, at least the majority of the committee is going to be able to endorse. That's important, I think.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to figure out. And so I'm still trying to figure out, are we going with the full amount, or is the committee coming with a recommendation for May 12th with a reduced amount? What's the goal of the committee right now?
Tina,
I thought, I'm so confused now, Steve.
This is what I believe, Steve. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I believe is happening. We're talking about a 1.5% increase in the millage, or 2.5 mils, and that entire package, without any programmatic cuts, without any cuts to the buses, without any cuts to the facilities, capital improvements. All the difference is just going to come out of the fund balance.
But I just said 1.5 as an arbitrary number. I want the committee to decide that.
Don, my vote is to go with the hold off on the buses. That was my thought on that. Your 1.7 million that you had taken out, a 1-year hold on the buses and facilities.
Okay, so you want that out?
I do.
Okay.
I know that's
I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
You're good with that, and that you want that out as well, Marty?
Yes.
I just don't see us. I don't see how we're going to sell. Yeah, but we bought buses, like 10 buses. I don't see that going over well.
Yes, that's right.
Irene, is that your recommendation as well?
That is my opinion, yes, it is.
The 1.7, Don, then the 1.7 that we're taking out of the budget for facilities and buses, and let's use the 1.5% increase, gets us back to where that full Act 1 increase would have been. Right?
Without that, yes. I mean, I'm not doing that math in my head, but I see where you're at, yes.
We might be forgetting a budget deficit gap that we had in there as well, Marty.
No, but I'm not saying that balances it. We still need to fund the deficit, but.
Right.
So.
Tina,
to take Don's 2 points,
Tina, if you're still there, are you okay with that 1.7 coming out?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so that, okay, from the four of you then, are you okay with 2.5 mils or 1.5%?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Mhm.
As a recommendation to the full board, yes.
Okay, well, that's at least 3 of you. All right,
Right,
so
but
I
it's
know what
at
I'm
least
doing.
3, which is enough to get it out of committee, so.
Okay,
That's good.
I think that's all I have unless there's, unless you want to go to public comment tonight.
Not like we have a choice, we have to.
Right.
Well, we've got to do it last time.
Yeah, it's only on facilities we don't do that.
Okay.
Right.
I have a
Mr.
question.
McGinley has his hand up. He's anxious to make a comment.
Just a question. Your half-day kindergarten plan, if that goes through, will that include transportation?
You know, John, that may or may not, but my understanding is previously when there was a half-day kindergarten program, they did not include transportation. So that's not the board have to have those options.
Well, to Steve's point, there's been kindergarten for 50 years, but there's only been transportation. There was only no transportation for 2 of those 50 years. That's the only
so
reason. That's the only
yeah,
reason I posed the question.
they don't have that. They don't have that narrowed down to that degree yet.
Okay,
It's just
thank you.
conjecture at this point.
It's not a next year item anyway. We'll talk about it next year for the following year, but it's not going to happen next year
So,
for 2021 school year.
Any other public comment for this evening?
This is Tara Huber. Can I make a comment at this point?
Certainly, Tara.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Yes,
Okay,
I can hear you.
I'm just was trying to follow my notes here. What exactly is the committee's recommendation? I'm very confused on what's being moved out of this committee for a vote in front of the board.
The committee recommendation as it stands now is to remove the $1.7 million that was part of the deficit that I had suggested that they put in a temporary slide on, which would include buses and capital improvements, purchases of new buses and capital improvements. That's being removed from the expenditure total in the amount of $1.7 million and a 1.5% increase or 2.5 mil increase as part of the revenue package we put forward from this committee.
As opposed to the 2.6%.
That's correct.
Don, can I just follow up there? The 1.7, is that strictly for the 10 buses or that's the entire infrastructure package?
Well, the package included $1.85 million for the improvements plus the buses. And so if the buses were 600,000, that included $2,450,000 for buses and capital improvements. And of that amount, 1.7 is being removed. So you have $750,000 for capital improvements if no buses are being purchased.
Okay. So that 750 still in there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the public? Going once, going twice, 3 times. Without that, any other comments from the board?
I'm
I wanted
good.
I'm good.
Go ahead. I wanted to say something.
Go ahead,
Go
Cindy.
ahead, Cindy.
Your idea about capping kindergarten, just realize that that will only give you savings for 1 year because the kids that you capped, the overage is going to come back in first grade, and then you're going to end up hiring new staff for their first grade the following year. So the savings would only get you for 1 year until all the people that you didn't include come back the next year. So I think it's a good idea to leave kindergarten the way it is. That would only be a short-term fix, and I don't think that's anything that you can do this year anyway. Just in listening what your recommendation is, I support your recommendation. I just wanted to let you know that. And that's it. Good job.
Thank you, Cindy. Any other board members for comment this evening?
I'm
Any
good.
closing comments from any administrators?
Good night.
Good night. You guys have a nice evening. Thank you.
See you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.